So let's talk about the third property of water. It's surface tension. So surface tension is going to allow for particles such as boats or little insects to float. Now, why is this important and how does this happen? This happens because water molecules are very tightly attracted to each other through hydrogen bonds, and we've discussed this earlier with the property of cohesion, right? So this hydrogen bond is so tight that basically it's not going to allow for particles such as a boat or insects to break it. So the whole thing about Moses breaking water and splitting water in half, that really does not happen and therefore really is a miracle, okay? So now why is it so important for us to have things to float? It's because of ice. Now, ice, we don't want it to sink to the bottom of the ocean floor, because if ice were to sink to the bottom of the ocean floor, everything from bottom up will start to freeze. Now, if everything freezes, what will happen to little organisms that are at the bottom of the ocean floor? They will also all freeze, right? And we don't want that. Also, we have gases that are very important for the organisms at the bottom of the ocean floor to live, right? So if that's the case, we don't want oxygen particles to be easily able to leave the water, okay? So we want to keep it down there. And so at the end of the day, all this, it's going to be very warm in comparison to the very top of the water because of this thing called the surface tension creating this barrier between liquid water and outside, okay? All right, now number 4, it's called universal solvent. So remember we talked about how water molecule is a polar thing. So water is polar. And remember back in the day, they used to teach us this thing, like dissolves like, okay? So like dissolves like. So if water is polar, okay, it's going to be dissolving anything else that is also polar. And that happens to be like ionic compounds, aka salts, right? Sugars, which are also polar, and so on and so forth, right? This is very important because we want to be able to dissolve things in water so that we can conduct electricity, so that we can create new chemical reactions, and so on and so forth, okay? All right, finally, high specific heat is the 5th and final water property. Now, why is this important? It's important because it's going to say basically water requires large amounts of heat energy, okay, amounts of heat energy to evaporate. So why is this so important? This is important because this is going to be helping us with thermoregulation, at least for animals, okay, thermoregulation. So if you look, here's a person, and let's just say he is sweating. Okay, and I say he, but it can be a she. All right, so these are not tears, guys. This is sweat. All right, so what happens is this person is very hot. If his heat is transferred over to the sweat gains enough kinetic energy to become a gas, and the sweat disappears. Now, when this happens, the heat from the person will be transferred over to the sweat, which will evaporate out. When that happens, the person's body temperature lowers. So that's how we end up doing thermoregulation. Also, another important thing is, if water were not to have a very high specific heat, what would happen to water on leaves and on plants? They would evaporate super fast. Well, if it requires a lot of energy, right, a lot of heat energy to evaporate, water will not evaporate very easily from leaves or just plants in general. And that's going to keep plants from wilting every 2 seconds. Good?